This is a little bit after, overlooking the city. And one of them that I preached on the end of it, I called The Immortals. It was right after that movie 300 had come out, where they were defending Thermopylae. And what did they call the Persian army? The Immortals. And I said, they're not the Immortals. We're the Immortals. Okay, and what that means is not just our bodies, not just our souls, but what we do is coming up out of the ground. And this is strange because a lot of what we do is getting crucified and buried. So we got to make some separation here, and that's what Paul's going to do. So first, let's look at Christ conquering everything going down. First of all, Christ's kingdom is advancing. What's going down? What do I mean by he's conquering things going down? Well, sometimes you hear this sort of trio that he conquered Satan, sin, and death. Satan, sin, and death. Let me get you to turn to one verse. Hebrews chapter 2. Hebrews 2, verse 9 and verse 14 and 15, if you put those ones together, you get a sense of what we mean by Satan, sin, and death going together and going downward and being crucified and buried in Christ. Hebrews 2, if you start at verse 9, we see him, Jesus, who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. So that's the first clue. He's, in a sense, tasting death, experiencing death, being our substitute in death, this great enemy. In verse 14 and 15, he goes on to talk about why Jesus had to become a man and what that does for us. It says, since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Now, if you don't know anything about the Old Testament passages that Paul's going to pull from later on in that famous saying, "Oh, death, where is your victory? Where's your sting?" You're like, what is it? He's mocking, but that doesn't sound right because we shouldn't be mocking. It doesn't give any comfort. I mean, once you're in death and so forth, you have to realize he's mocking death because he sees death. He's actually the only one taking this seriously by mocking death that hard. So if you don't know anything about the Old Testament passages that Paul's pulling from, well, then consider Hebrews 2 here, because when he says that the devil has power over death, he goes on to say that Jesus is delivering all of us who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. What on earth does that mean? Why are we afraid of death? Let me tell you why we're not afraid of death. Atheists believe that we're going to be eaten by worms. If you really believed that, would you fear death? No, you may fear a painful death, but then you would be fearing the pain. But you would see death as the relief from it. And if you were resistant, you would not fear what is on the other side. Is that why we fear death? That is not why we fear death. The very nature of the fear of death testifies to what this slavery is that he's actually talking about, what this fear is, what the devil's holding over us is not simply a painful death. He's holding something more ominous before us, namely a future facing our judge. And you see the devil's job description in other passages, Revelation 12:9, in Zechariah 3 when he accuses Joshua the priest, and in other places, what is the devil doing? He's accusing the brethren day and night. He's bringing up real things we did wrong and which we deserve hell for. That's why we fear death, and that's the only thing that makes sense. And so Jesus is defeating Satan in this sense of been punished in Christ instead of on you. Devil's got nothing on you. Unless you enjoy digging up old bones on yourself and want to feel guilty again. But of course we don't want that. And so Hebrews 2 is going to help us here understand so much of what's going on in this passage. When Christ's kingdom advances, he destroys the devil at the cross. He buries your sin at the cross. What's the problem? We still die.